Hello and welcome to the Philippines. The real estate market in the Philippines is a very interesting topic indeed. In fact, I often get a lot of comments, people who are wanting to build, people who say you should never build in the Philippines. You should never build a house or own a house. Um, and as much as anything, I want to start a discussion and get some input from people who know a lot more about this than I do. Many of you know that I've been reviewing some properties for about 4 years now in the Philippines, and I try to do it in an unbiased way, and I think that's important because I'm not an expert. In fact, I'm not an economist, I'm not a real estate agent. And as far as economists, you can ask 10 economists what they think of the economy, and you'll get 10 different answers, and probably much the same with real estate experts as well. Anyway, I have done some research and I'm going to lay out some information. I'm going to tell you about some of the upward pressures on real estate in the Philippines, the reasons why the real estate will continue to go up, the growth and prices, and also I will give you some information about some of the downward pressures that could be happening presently and possibly into the future. And of course, the Philippines is a large land area, many different islands, and the real estate changes by island, changes by city, by town. A number of reasons for that. The world economy has an effect on that. The Asian economy has an effect on that. And of course, the local economies have a great effect on that as well. And anyway, we're going to get into some of the details and looking forward to some very interesting comments as well. The main bank in the Philippines, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, puts out some data on real estate, on land prices, house prices. And of course, housing is broken down into single family detached, duplex houses, townhouses, condominiums, and we'll get into a little more of that breakdown a little bit later. But here is they put out information. Colliers, which is a major worldwide um, property management company, puts out some information. A number of real estate companies put out some information, and some of they have some graphs, but a lot of that stuff is in beta. And for that matter, statistics, you have to be careful of statistics because this particular graph, it's when you use averages, you can have very low average on something, and you take some very high number. In fact, this happens in the climate debate. You can have, if you're taking temperatures, for instance, and I've got a geography and history background. You take temperatures out in the country, and then you take one temperature in the middle of a city in a heat sink where you've got all this heat, concrete, and that one temperature will raise the average considerably. So you have to be careful of statistics. It is also very important to understand that just because a graph is going up doesn't mean it's going to continue to grow up. And here you have percent change over a year earlier for a number of years. And you can see about 2009, after the big recession, 2008 housing recession in the U.S., it affected the economy across the world and had some effect on the housing situation here because you've got the wealth of individuals that had so much money into property in the U.S. For instance, um, they were they were spending a lot of money. A certain percent of those people are spending a lot of money here on property. Well, you have a worldwide recession, especially in the U.S. Those people are no longer spending money, so there was a dip in the rise there. I'm going to try to provide you with as much practical information as I can. And I suspect that there will be a few real estate people watching this video, and certainly invite them to get involved in the discussion as well. Um, Sometimes predictions are self-fulfilling. In fact, there's a lot of people in the U.S. talking about the impending recession, and they're talking that up. Anytime there's election, one group of people is hoping that the economy will go into a recession to help change the results of elections. Anyway, the same thing. You can talk up the real estate. It happened before the 2008 housing recession in the U.S. Everybody was making money on housing. Uh, People who were buying houses, prices were going up. They were waiting 6 months, a year of flipping the house, selling it for big profits, buying another house, doing the same. The real estate agents were making money. The buyers were making money. The banks were making tons of money. Everybody was making money. And everybody knew these properties were overpriced. 3 years before the crash, I think many people knew it was coming sooner or later, but the investors or those people who are speculating, you get caught up in that. Man, I can make a lot of money really fast, and those types of the mob mentality, if you will, can drive up prices, continue to do that. I don't know if that's happening in the Philippines to a point. Here again, I'm going to give you some reasons why the property is going up and probably will continue for some time, although I believe it may be leveling off in some areas. Here again, uh, the Philippines is in an 8-year housing boom presently, and the economy has been growing at one of the fastest rates in Asia for many years. And it's going to slow down a little bit this year, but it's still growing very quickly, very fast. And that has a big result in foreigners pouring money into the economy, in OFWs, overseas foreign workers are a big target. They are big buyers of houses, condominiums, townhouses here in the Philippines. I've met a number of real estate agents who even travel. Their companies send delegations to many different cities in the United States to recruit buyers, Philippine buyers primarily, who live overseas, not in the U.S., in Europe and Asia. And they've got money to spend, and they are buying up a lot of these properties. Much of the growth is in the larger towns and cities, of course, and you have different provinces that have grown little or none, maybe even gone backwards. Depends upon their situation. They may have been hit by a typhoon or something. But anyway, when you do comparisons, you say, well, where does the Philippines fit in comparing it with other Asian countries? What are your choices? And the Philippines stands out as being one of the lower priced places to build. Now, these are not your province prices, your country prices. These are in the city, probably Manila. It didn't give me the exact details. Uh, you can build much less in the province or the smaller towns, obviously. But anyway, your competition. You look at your competition, where people are going to invest, build, start businesses. And this is just one of many charts I looked at, and I'm not going to bore everybody with all the charts I looked at. It got to be a bit mind-boggling after a bit. But even Thailand, more expensive to build. I've been told by a Filipina real estate agent that worked as a real estate agent in Thailand many years ago that one of the reasons houses tend to be less expensive in Thailand is that they overbuilt. They overbuilt many, many years ago, so there is still a larger supply. The supply and demand, two things, supply and demand, and location, location, location. Two things that will help determine your pricing. But anyway, the Philippines is very favorably positioned with other Asian countries as far as the cost of doing business, of building here. So that is upward pressure. There's a lot of reasons to come here and build. Many companies, even large companies, Hong Kong Land is here building the huge Mandani Bay over in Baguio City next to the sea. Very huge project. So there's a big demand, big developers, not just from the Philippines, but from around the world coming in and getting involved in this process. Another very important factor is the price to rent ratio. And the explanation on this wasn't as clear to me as what I wished it was. But if I understand this properly, the Philippines being at the lower end, it's basically your return on investment, how many years you get your return on investment. And the fewer years, obviously, the better your return on investment. And there again, the Philippines is positioned very well for investors to invest here. And investors usually go out and do their due diligence and investigate these types of issues. So we are positioned very strongly in the rental market. One article I read said that, and this was in a particular area. So when I give this example, understand it's a particular area. I think Makati in Manila area, and they stated that with all their studies of returns on investment, and they had broken it down by types of housing also, condominiums, townhouses, detached homes, and so forth. And anyway, they had determined that in that area, that a townhouse of approximately 50 square meters had one of the best returns on investment for rental properties at about 9% a year. And I have seen rates anywhere from usually between 7, sometimes 8% a year on returns on investment properties around the Cebu City area. And those are projected, and there are a number of factors involved there, and there's no guarantees. It depends upon different properties have different returns on investments for a number of reasons. And something that I thought was true quite some time ago is that you're very, very high end, like say 250 square meters. That's a lot of space. It's very high end, and something like that tends to hold its value. The people with a lot of money can buy those and either rent them out, keep them for a time, and resell them. Those types of places tend to be maintained better for longer periods of time, advertise, and they've got that luxury high-end status that people with money want. So those places generally have a good return on investment. And I'm going to do a few more reviews of higher end properties as well in the near future, I hope. This was one equation I found that has something to do with this. I don't understand it at all. I tried to take a calculus course once and that didn't work out very well. So if you can use it, great. Who is buying the land? Who is buying the properties, the houses, the condominiums that is causing the prices to increase? The demand is there. And I have been really surprised in the 4 years that I have been in the Philippines. Most of the condominiums that I've lived in 5 now, different ones. 4 of those were majority Filipino families living and buying those properties. The last place I lived at, Bamboo Bay, they were still selling. They had just opened up the 3rd tower, and I lived on a floor that had model units on it, and almost every group of people that came up there were Filipinos. Occasionally there would be a foreigner, American, Westerner, or another Asian with a Filipina wife or girlfriend looking, but 95% or more of the people looking were Filipinos. And where are they getting their money? Well, there is a growing upper class and middle class in the Philippines. And not only that, OFWs, overseas Filipino workers. The world depends on Filipino workers. They're all over the world. China is requesting, I think, over 50,000 Filipino English teachers. Germany is requesting, I think, 50,000 Filipino nurses. The U.S., if you've been to any hospitals, hotels, you understand that Filipinos are a big part of the workforce. The cruise lines employ huge numbers of Filipinos, and they work in trades, construction trades, all types of trades all over the world. I have a Filipina friend, an engineer lady that works in a furniture company making IKEA furniture in Vietnam. There are several Filipinos working there, engineers, and as well as engineers from other parts of the world. But anyway, they send, that's about 10% of the population, about close to 10 million people, I believe, sending money, either buying themselves, as I've stated earlier, because these development companies send salespeople out to target specifically OFWs because they have money, number two, and they want to invest in their country, the Philippines. And they also send money back. They send huge amounts of money back to family, who then have money to buy into condominiums, houses, townhouses. So they're probably the number one buyer. Don't know the statistics. I don't have that data. The Chinese, they've got what, over 1.6 billion people in China. A, even if a small percentage of those people are rich, that's a huge amount of money. They are buying up property all over the world, including the Philippines. The Philippines has a large Chinese population, and they are spending money here, put it that way. Koreans are up until I think maybe even recently, I don't know if they're passed by the Chinese, the biggest tourists here. I've met many Koreans who were born right here in the Philippines, and they have businesses here. Koreans are a large part of the population, the tourist population in particular, and many of them living here and buying property as well. Other Asians from other countries here, of course, and then you have Europeans buying here. I've met the building I'm in presently. It's the first building I've lived in that I believe is probably majority foreign occupied. Either they have bought, and I've met a Norwegian who bought a place here. I've met an Australian and a guy from New Zealand who have bought a place here, and I see a lot of Koreans and Japanese, and so anyway, there are foreigners who are coming in and buying these condominiums up. And tourists are going to come. Another upward pressure. Tourists, the Philippines has a great tourism industry. They have great beaches, they have caves, waterfalls, casinos, lots of things to do and see here in the Philippines. And the tourism business, even with some of the issues they've had in the past few years with terrorism in parts of Mindanao, and some of the bad press they've gotten around the world, much of it unjustified, I think. But anyway, the tourism industry here is growing, and in many areas it's in its infancy. That means, and I think I read yesterday that Duterte has declared 3 or 4 more areas as tourist areas, and asked the tourism department and Department of Transportation to do what they do to make those areas more accessible to tourists, and give them reasons to go home and tell all their friends and relatives about these new places they visited. Anyway, tourism is going to continue, and as tourists come, more people will be interested in living here. They need a place to stay. They need condominiums. They need hotels. There is a shortage presently in some of the cities. I think we're just finally catching up with but there are times when it's tough to get a hotel room in Cebu City, especially during festival times. So you need to book those early. Uh, but the building continues, but I don't think it's going to catch up for a couple more years. Personally, there was a time 3 years ago that I thought maybe they're overbuilding. Maybe they're overbuilding. I think the vacancy rate outside of the festival times, the vacancy rate may be a little bit larger than it was uh, with so many new condominiums opening up. But the fact of the matter is, there is demand there. So those people need places to stay in the cities and out in the tourist areas as well. So you have that demand. Another factor that is going to drive demand is the huge increase in infrastructure spending. More trains, more roads, more airports opening up, so tourists can get into other areas. There's a new big new international airport on Mactan Island, so they can get many more direct flights from different countries, and that's already started happening. There's a new airport on Bohol Island. There are other airports either being expanded or new airports being built. And I've been told recently that they're actually planning to they have a small airport on Siquijor Island that they're going to build a larger airport as well. And just difficult to keep up with all this information, but there's a lot going on. Roads going in, train lines, rail lines going in, passenger and freight. Uh, Cities being expanded and offering incentives. I read an article recently that more and more retirees are planning to retire overseas because their retirement money just doesn't go very far in their own country, and particularly the U.S., I think the article was talking about. But that will push demand as well. Those people need to live someplace, and many will rent, so they need a place. They need new buildings to live in, or they're going to build a house or something, and there are ways to do that. You can't own the land, but you can build a house, lease the land here, so you have that pressure as well. The cost of living here is a major factor in people picking the Philippines. Other factors, international factors, things like political unrest in some countries, things like a country like Thailand making it more difficult, which they've done recently, make it more difficult for expats to live there unless their pension is at least, I think, right around 2,000 US dollars a month, something like that. And used to get by with just writing a letter and saying, yes, my pension is above that. Embassy would stamp it without verifying it. The embassy will no longer do that. So a lot of these people have no way to verify. If they're making less, it makes it much more difficult for them to stay there. Many people from Thailand are planning to come to the Philippines or other countries. 1 million pesos is worth about 20,000 US dollars. That's 50 pesos to the US dollar. So for 2 or 3 million pesos, you can build a pretty nice house here in the Philippines as well. Now, a little bit about downward pressures on real estate and prices. Um, Political issues and laws can have a major effect. Changes in tax laws, for instance. I read an article recently. Davao City, which is just north of Cebu City, maybe an hour and a half or so. There is presently apparently some type of incentive, tax incentive. Uh, and from the article I read, the Philippines has a rather high corporate tax, And but there's a loophole. Certain corporations can avail of a smaller tax, and there was talk about changing the law so that would no longer be applicable. And there is a huge, I believe it's a microchip electronics manufacturer up in Davao, and been there for years. They employ probably a couple thousand people. They were thinking about expanding, but the fact that that tax law may be rescinded so that they would have to pay a much higher tax. I believe they have decided not to expand there, but I think they're going over to Cambodia instead. So politics, tax laws can have a big effect on property, businesses, employment, how much money people have. There is a business practice here that uses contract labor, used very extensively across the Philippines. And there's been a big push for a number of years, and especially recently, to end, I think they call it ENDO. And it's contract labor, and these people sign up for 6 months, and then they have to sign up again for 6 months. And so it's a way for businesses to save money because then they don't have to pay the benefits and many other things that are required by law of employees. Also makes it easier to fire them without paying unemployment fees, that type of thing. From my understanding, I'm not an expert on it, but as that talk has been going around and in the political circles and in the legislatures, some companies have said, they push back and say, well, if you do that, we're not going to expand there. We're not going to expand our businesses there. So that, depending upon how they do that, how diplomatically they do it, and try to keep both sides happy. I know there have been a number of companies that were told you need to regularize your employees. I think McDonald's, Jollibee, uh, PLDT may have been forced to do it. I know they had gone to a lot of contract labor. Uh, but anyway, things like that can affect the money and the business if businesses continue to expand. So this discussion could be many hours long, of course, and in the end, we wouldn't really have a final conclusion. But anyway, I will say that after looking at all the information that I looked at and my experience here in 4 years, I believe that the upward pressure will continue for a number of years, and I do think that prices are going to level off. But there again, depends upon where you're at. You can go to the provinces, different provinces. You can go to different cities and towns, and you have completely different factors at work there. So I'm talking about basically the bigger cities. But I think the prices are going to start to level off. I think rental prices may start leveling off. I think they have. There again, supply and demand and location. Is it right next to a mall? To the resort type area? What's the demand? Or is there a festival in town? Is there a big convention in town? So there's more demand, and the rooms are getting bought up, so they raise the rates. All of those factors come into play, and in the end, I will say that I agree with many of the experts, or let me put it more positively. Many of the experts agree with me that this growth is going to continue for a number of years, and it won't be a steady rise. There will be ups and downs based on a number of things, political and could be environmental, typhoons, earthquakes. A number of things could upset the basket. Anyway, I hope I threw some good ideas out there and give you some things to think about. I'm really looking forward to some of the comments, people who have personal experience in the business, rental experience, buying and selling property here. There are different areas, even up by Angeles, Subic Bay area, where they've got a real hot, I believe they have a hot real estate market up there. It's completely different than here in Cebu City, and I think Angeles City is actually building onto that city, the new green city, environmentally green, I believe, and railroads going into that area, passenger as well as freight, which will help that area grow. So you really need to look at all the information about an area when you're determining, especially if you're investing for profit long term. Anyway, the Philippines is a great place to live, great place to retire, and probably a great place to invest in for the short term for sure, and probably even for the long term. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please like the video. Please share the video. Please subscribe. Safe travels to you all wherever you're at, and I'll see you next time.